So, my name is Leslie Hitchens, and I'm the Dean of this faculty. This is the 8th year of my deanship, and I have to say it's been one of the most exciting times of my entire career. And UTS has just been a fabulous experience to work here, and this faculty is just a great faculty to be involved with, both in terms of faculty and staff and students. As Dean, I'm responsible. I have overall responsibility for all that we do in the faculty. And so I have responsibility for the students, and I have responsibility for the staff and for the overall direction of the faculty. And it's some of that I want to tell you a little bit about tonight, so that you can understand more about who we are as a faculty of law. So, as I said, what I want to do is talk to you about UTS Law, what it is we do here, and the type of legal education that we provide. I think it's really important to understand that we're not saying we're the best, or that, you know, you must come here. It's about you having information of this law school and making a choice because of your particular circumstances, interests, and so forth. But here are a couple of reasons, I suppose, as to why UTS, or what we see as important and successful about UTS. So as you can see, UTS graduates do very well in securing jobs. Now, this is a national survey that's conducted, and as you can see at the bottom of the screen, this information was available as at June 2019. So it's an independently conducted survey measuring graduate outcomes. And 92% of our graduates secure jobs within 4 months of graduating. And that's if they're full-time, seeking full-time, etc. And they earn good salaries as well, as you can see. So UTS is still a relatively young university, and yet it's been incredibly successful in world rankings. And of course, we always like that when we do well in them. But it is ranked as Australia's #1 university. I think in a practical sense, what that does mean for us in the university and the law faculty is we're not bound down in ways of doing things. Don't get me wrong, I think tradition is great, and law is steeped in traditions. It's one of the important ways, if you like, that it builds and grows and so forth. But I think it means that we are able to be more flexible and to make changes and to respond to changing circumstances and to be willing to shed old practices. For the law faculty, we have a very strong commitment to education and to teaching and to research that is really real world involved, if you like. So whilst we believe in education, in teaching and research as being academically rigorous, we also believe that it's important to have a very practically focused outcome. So if you're studying law here, we try to think about that very much from the way in which law is practiced, the way in which law develops. And we make sure that the assessments and the way in which you're taught all help you to apply that law in a very practical sense. In the same way, we think about that in terms of our research. We do research that we believe has a real world impact. And last year, in an Australian government survey, we were the only law school that achieved the highest scores for both engagement and impact in relation to our research. So everything we do, we try to see, how does that work in the real world? What does it look like? How does it have an impact? And so many of our colleagues as well have expertise in professional areas of law and bring that knowledge and expertise into the faculty, whether it's through taking a class, being one of our sessional teachers, or whether it's coming in doing guest lectures or in some other way engaged with our faculty. But we believe very strongly for that. And I think that that's what people see our graduates as being like, graduates who are practically focused, who are able to understand how law works in the real world. We're very focused as well, not only on knowledge, but in that practical sense of focusing on skills as well, so that all subjects think about the skills that might be needed and might be aligned with that subject. So for example, if you're in a subject and there are certain skills that might be looking at communication skills, oral, written, analytical skills, problem-solving skills, then the subject, the academics teaching that subject, will make certain that the assessment in that subject is also designed to assess not just your knowledge, but also the skills that you have developed and that they think are important for that particular subject. And so that's a very strong feature of what we try to do here. I think as well, we have a very strong collaboration in this faculty between academics, between faculty staff, and between students. We work closely together, and a couple of examples of that, which we'll talk about later, are our Law Students Society. We feel we have a great partnership with them, and also our Brennan Justice and Leadership Program, which is co-run with students and faculty. So we have a very strong commitment to extracurricular activity, and many academics are engaged in supporting the students who run competitions and so forth, which further give opportunities for building skills and knowledge, as well as building relationships and networks and so forth within the faculty. But one of the things that I think is also really important for us in terms of innovation is that we've really tried to look ahead to how law is changing. Law, as I said, is a very traditional subject. There are key areas of knowledge and they are called colloquially the priestly 11. So there are key areas of knowledge, very traditional areas of law, fundamental areas of law, that every student must learn and must be assessed in order to qualify to be admitted as a lawyer. And those traditional areas of law will never change. The need for that deep disciplinary knowledge will not change. But the way in which lawyers are working, the way in information technology, artificial intelligence is changing the practice of law, is creating new law, and is creating new challenges for old law. It's really important that students these days can have that understanding. And that's something that has been very important in this faculty in trying to understand what that might look like and to give our students opportunities to understand what that future of the legal profession might look like. And I'll give you some more illustration of that a little bit later. So our curriculum is, we believe, very integrated. As I said, we try to look to the future. We're constantly evaluating what the landscape looks like, and we have really good connections with those who are in practice, those who are leading this legal technology space, and we work closely with them to understand what that looks like and to give our students opportunities. And I think something important here is that your learning doesn't just come through a formal curriculum. What you do in the classroom is of course very helpful, But we also strive to provide opportunities that are extracurricular that can give really valuable and important learning experiences. For some students, life-changing experiences. One of those that we're very proud of is the Allens, it's a very long title, the Allens Nyota Logic UTS Law Tech Challenge for Social Justice. And this is the most amazing experience that our students have. They work as volunteers. They spend a number of months working on this, and they work with real NGO clients who have a problem that they think might be able to be solved through the use of technological applications. The students work with Allens, a major law firm, in teams and with tech advisors. And out of that, they build technological solutions for the client. This isn't just a practice area, it's not just a game. The applications have to be ready to be used by the end of the challenge for students, for the client. And I'm very proud to say that I think of over the last 3 years, that probably means we've developed about 15 or so applications. All but one are in use, and the only one that isn't in use was because the law changed. But these have been really valuable opportunities for students. With King & Wood Mallisons, another major law firm, we've been able to operate hackathons, and more recently we've been doing some design thinking work with them around how to think through future ways in which legal professions will work. With Westpac Corporate Council, we've done again some design thinking work with them, where students and Westpac themselves try to imagine what the future of law will look like. So these are just incredible experiences that students can have working with leaders in the field, whether as lawyers, whether as people who are thinking about new tech solutions and so forth. Some of our students who've done something like the Allens Nyota challenge, who've done our major, which I'll talk about in a moment, have gone on to create careers in that legal technology future area. I'm just going to talk briefly now about the legal futures and technology. When we started looking at this area, we realized that actually it was great having the extracurricular opportunities, but we should do something more coherent within the law degree itself. And what we have done is create a major. Now it says there, as you can see by the title, more than just coding. I don't think learning to code is really what it's all about. What's really important is that you understand the implications of technology as a lawyer, not just how it works, but also how it might affect the law, how it might affect practice, how it might affect your ethical obligations. What is the responsible use of technology? This is a major that students don't have to enroll for in first year. They can make a decision to do later in the degree. And it's a very practical course, as well as being very cutting edge in the sense of looking at opportunities for internship, and then doing capstone projects where students will work on specific projects, often again problems that that somewhere we're working with, partnering with, might want addressed. And so that's a really deep dive into understanding the future of law and the technology around that. So we, I think, are probably still the only law school in Australia that has created a complete major around this, rather than just one or two subjects. But I want to go on and talk about a little bit more about the faculty-student collaboration that we have. And a really key part of this is our Brennan Justice and Leadership Program. This is a faculty-student society collaboration. It is wholly run in partnership with the faculty and with the students. There are two co-directors of the Brennan Justice and Leadership Program, a student and an academic. And they make their decisions together. We don't make decisions and then tell the students what the program is going to be doing. we make them in partnership. But in essence, it tries to look at two key areas. Excuse me. One is the notion of justice. And so part of the program is reflections on justice. But we do that in a whole variety of ways. And of course, this session, we've been doing it online as well. So we do things that are around, it might be films, it might be talks, it might be debates, really exploring the notion of justice. I have a very strong view that if you graduate as a lawyer, no matter how you practice, lawyers have an additional responsibility, and it is a responsibility to see justice observed and to see the rule of law observed. And it doesn't matter whether you practice in a commercial law, or any type of practice, those are fundamental attributes and values that every lawyer should adhere to. And so the Brennan program really sums that up. The other aspect of the Brennan Justice and Leadership program is the notion that leadership comes through service, that is leading professionals within the community, that our leadership is about service. And so students do volunteer work, both locally and internationally, in order to reflect that part of the program. We have a number of other possibilities. As you can see there, we have a number of centres, all reflecting something that's at the heart of this law faculty as well, and that is social justice, that we believe in fairness and equality and in justice. So we have a number of centres: Anti-Slavery Australia, which looks at modern issues such as forced marriage, labour trafficking and so forth. Australasian Legal Information Institute, which seeks to bring about open access to law. Law, Health, Justice, and the Centre for Media Transition. And students have opportunities to do internships and voluntary work, again, at those centres, as well as, of course, a whole variety of other opportunities. We also provide a lot of assistance to students, both UTS and in the law faculty, to help you think about careers, and particularly to give you opportunities to explore careers that might not be front and centre. It's very easy, as you'll discover when you're doing a law degree, to know the big law firms and how they're, what the career path is for them. But other areas of law which are equally valuable, equally important, and which students may be interested in, it's not always as easy to find the route to those careers. But we try to create those opportunities through UTS Careers, and I should say also through our Law Student Society. They do a lot of really good work too in helping to support students thinking about future careers. The other thing that I think is really important is that we have an incredibly amazing, actually, faculty. The academics that you will be taught by are leaders, both perhaps through the legal profession or particular areas of law within the legal profession, whether it's labour law, the way legal practice operates, law and ethics, and also in research. So a colleague there, Thalia Anthony, does incredibly important research, again with a great deal of impact, around Aboriginal communities and injustice facing Aboriginal communities. Just recently, she led quite a lot of work about, and you might have seen some of this in the media, about the impact of the COVID virus on prison communities. So we're very lucky that our academics here have a very rich academic and professional and practical background, and they share that with our students, and very often there are research opportunities as well. But I'm just now going to introduce one of our colleagues, and that's David Carter, to just talk a little bit about how his study of law has led him to his career, and actually what his research area is about. And I should say that I taught David corporate law when I still taught in the law faculty. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Leslie. So yes, my name is David Carter, and I'm a senior lecturer here at UTS in the law faculty. And as Leslie said, I'm both a proud graduate of the law school, having completed my Bachelor of Laws here, which feels like a long time ago. And of course, as Leslie says, I had the pleasure of having Leslie as my tutor and lecturer in corporate law. In fact, it was myself and my brother who would sit at the back of the classroom, trying our very best to impress who I didn't know at the time would become my future boss. So I must have done something right to be hired later on. Look, I suppose as an introduction to who I am and how someone like me would fit into your time here at UTS, if you were a student here, you would probably first meet me in criminal law in your first year of the LLB or the JD for that matter. This is a core subject that everyone undertakes in a law degree, and you would sit in a classroom alongside 25 or so other students in a seminar with me, and we would spend a couple of sessions of 2 hours together a week, so in 4 hours in total, having a kind of intensive, small and interactive seminar around criminal law and procedure as we work through everything from homicide through to fraud and business related white collar crime, as well as police powers to arrest. Later on, you might come across me in electives. We have a range of electives in the faculty, and my elective areas tend to be around healthcare, health law, public health law, quarantine law, so I'm very busy at the moment, and then later on elective theory subjects on things like justice. So I'm one of the academics at UTS who specialises in healthcare and health law. There's a pretty large group of us here, and we're probably one of the best places to study anything to do with that in the country. My other area of expertise is criminal law, and so I get to combine criminal law and healthcare law in new and interesting ways. It means it's a busy time at the moment, but also I hope it's something that can make a big difference. And that's something that I think unites us all at UTS, a real desire to make a difference. There are three things that I wanted to say, and only three things that I think are worth saying about studying law at UTS. The first is that it's a really friendly and engaging and outward-looking faculty. And that means both our faculty members, our academics, as well as our students. The second is that as a faculty, we are really flexible. I think we really understand and encourage our students to stretch themselves, to take on new challenges, and I think we as a faculty understand that that takes genuine support from our academics to help our students go out into the world and to do great things. The third thing is that the law faculty is interested in and always involved in a wide and diverse way of being a lawyer, both in a traditional way as well as other ways too. So a couple of things to say about those. The first thing is, if I start with the last point, the faculty is always interested in supporting its students to engage in a diverse practice of law. As Leslie indicated, my own career is a bit like this. My degree at UTS meant that I was able to engage in a diverse set of workplaces and work experiences. The skills I developed, the networks I built, meant that I've been privileged to work in the healthcare sector, where I spent most of my career, a little time in investment banking as well, and then some time in the not-for-profit sector leading the Wayside Chapel in King's Cross. These are really diverse workplaces, really diverse ways of working, but each of them relied on the education that I received here. My ability to work with people, to not be afraid of conflict, to be able to engage with that conflict and to resolve it, including sometimes very complex disputes in healthcare, but to also take on new areas of knowledge and to synthesize them really quickly for the benefit of all. This is something that is the core of a legal education, regardless of whether or not you end up being a kind of traditional looking lawyer, a judge, or someone like me who runs private hospitals for a living. These are the things that at some point you develop in your degree, and all of a sudden you find when you're in the workplace, colleagues from other disciplines sort of turning to you and saying, wow, how did you do that? And you think, oh, that's normal. But actually, it's something that we really work hard to try and build in each of our students. The second point I want to talk about, and I think this is important, particularly in today's workplace, is that UTS Law is flexible and that we genuinely want to encourage our students to stretch themselves and to take on new challenges. I know, for example, just this week, I'm working with one of my students that I first met 3 or 4 years ago when they studied criminal law with me in their first year. I'm helping them to apply for an internship. Well, it's an online internship in these days of COVID, but I've started to help them understand how they can write their CV better and position themselves for interesting adventures. Another student I started to work with is starting to stretch themselves in new ways, applying themselves to interesting legal challenges and legal research about the use of public health powers to detain people during COVID. This is an area that I work on, it is my specialty, and I spent the last couple of months working as part of UTS Law with hospitals around the country to write and develop new policies and procedures for how we deal with the possibility of an overstretched health system. In short, how do we best, in a just way, allocate resources when we have to choose between two people when we've only got one bed? And I've been able to bring this student in with me into some of those conversations. I've been able to bring them into this really complex and new area of work, and have been able to sort of lead them through the policy and advising process as a lawyer and legal academic, and help them do legal research, which is now making a real impact in the health system. The final point is that we are, I think, a really friendly, a really engaging and very outward-looking group of people, both our students and our faculty. I think if there's something that marks a UTS student and someone who is going to do well here at UTS, is that they are outward-looking and that they are a doer. So many of our students are keen to make a difference, keen to try their hand at different types of work, keen to try their hands in different industries. And so too are our academics. The people who will teach you and supervise you and guide you are interested in law in the real world and interested in law in lots of different areas. I know that in my own team in criminal law, we have people, for example, who are really global experts in offensive language law, people who are really committed to reforming the way in which we punish people for swearing, because it has such awful effects on young people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and people who are homeless. But by the same token, another colleague has just come back from 5 years of working in Malawi in Africa, where he led a very large legal project to re-sentence all prisoners who were on death row, after constitutional reforms meant that we could re-sentence them and hopefully take them off death row. I mean, these are amazing challenges. They are very diverse, right? But they just even exist just in criminal law, and there are a whole bunch of other areas that you might want to think about. But I suppose the point is that if you come here and you want to make a difference and try new things, you'll be surrounded by academics who understand that, academics who want you to do that, and academics who are going to make sure that when you put your hand up to try something out, they're going to be flexible enough to help you do that, and so get out into the world and make a difference. Thanks, Leslie.
So I want to just also let you know that we have a lot of global opportunities as well through internships and so forth. And I think these is something really important, because it allows you to really experience, first of all, an understanding of law in another country, but also to develop your own sense of cultural awareness and being sensitive to the different ways in which things are done. And that comes through to the fore, particularly, I think, when you are in a work situation rather than simply as a tourist. And so we have a lot of opportunities for students to do that. And I think that sense of building that cultural awareness and also building your resilience, your ability to adapt to new situations, is something very important that many of the larger law firms in particular are looking for. Or if you're going to follow a path, a social justice path, working for an NGO or something, you really have to have that kind of resilience and that sensitivity to other cultures and other ways of doing things. There are lots of scholarships available, and you can certainly find more information about those on our website. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Pia Gonzalez. Pia is a Bachelor of Laws, Bachelor of Business student, and she is in her 5th year, so her final year. And I then want to introduce Jazz Oswald. Jazz is one of our alumni, and as you can see, he's working in Policy and Operations Assistant at FinTech Australia. And again, I'll come back so you can hear a bit more about what Pia and Jazz have focused on in their time at UTS. David Carter, you've just met. And I also wanted to introduce our Associate Professor Maxine Evans, our Associate Dean for Education. And so Pia, What might be interesting for students to know a little bit about is you took the law internship subject and you took it with resolution 123. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about how you found that opportunity and how that sort of helped you. What's important for you in terms of that practical experience?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Leslie. So yes, hi everyone, my name is Pia, and I'm actually, interestingly enough, I did participate in the internship at Resolution 123, which is actually an employment law firm who practice new law to provide quick, affordable and simple advice for employees. And basically I stumbled across the opportunity because I actually had been working for a startup in the UTS startups space. And Resolution 123, as I've mentioned, they practice new law and they actually operate out of the UTS startup space as well. And I happened to stumble across a solicitor at the firm who worked there. And I just took genuine interest and approached her to see if they had any opportunities, whether they had any experience opportunities, and they actually told me that they were in the process of developing a partnership with the Faculty of Law to participate in the internship subject. And so what that is basically an elective that you can do as part of your law degree at UTS. And UTS basically has partnerships with various different internship opportunities, whether it's at large firms or in-house counsel opportunities, and I decided to do the one at Resolution 123. And I honestly think it's been incredibly instrumental in my experience in just shaping my understanding of the law and being able to be exposed to the practical aspects of what it means to be a solicitor, and also very interestingly in practicing new law, which is basically just a fancy way of saying that we use technology to really facilitate legal processes and things that can really be automated to kind of focus more on delivering more value to clients instead of, for example, we're able to offer fixed fee solutions and do task-based fees rather than charging per hour. So it's doing things like that that really make a difference. And yeah, it's really been monumental in shaping my experience and also shaping my career and where I want to head into the future. And also, luckily enough, I was asked to stay there as well. So being there now has been a really interesting opportunity, especially in light of everything, but it's been really interesting to see, as you were mentioning before, Leslie, I think as well, the really crucial role that technology plays in the law, especially in a time like now, to see how we've been able to pivot very easily because we already were very used to working remotely and working from different spaces, and really seeing that playing out and obviously being able to do that as part of an internship subject meant that I could also allow that opportunity to count towards my degree as well, which is a huge bonus. So it's a win-win across the whole board for sure.
That's great, Pia. And I might mention that the founder of Resolution 123, Carla Stebbing, is also an alumna of UTS Law, and she's done done a fabulous job. And I've noticed how active she's been during this period because of all the employment issues that have come up for people during the virus. How have you enjoyed your course, and what are you planning on pursuing as a career post-university? And perhaps also in talking about how you've enjoyed your course, you might also talk about some of your extracurricular activities with LSS and your role there.
Definitely. I think starting a law degree in itself obviously can be very intimidating at the start, but I've definitely enjoyed my experience at UTS. And something I wanted to mention as well in terms of being involved in extracurricular opportunities at UTS is just the culture that I've noticed at UTS is honestly so empowering. And the community of law at UTS, we seem to be very encouraging of each other. And I think that's really been a big part of why I've enjoyed my degree at UTS is that My participation in extracurricular activities, for example, was encouraged by friends that I had who said, you know, there are these opportunities, why don't you come and join us? And they were a really big part of me participating and later being the Vice President of Social Justice at the UTS LSS, which is our student law society and student-run law society at UTS. And so I think really the community and the culture that we have at UTS Law has been a huge factor in my enjoyment of the degree, let alone so many other aspects, to be honest. As I mentioned, even being able to take electives that are so practical and that go far beyond, obviously you have your foundational skills of being able to write clearly and communicate clearly and learning really incredibly interesting theoretical concepts of the law, but then extending even beyond that and having assignments that really test our ability in ways that lawyers actually operate in the real world is a huge factor and why I also enjoyed my degree throughout, for sure.
Great, thanks, Pia. I might turn to Jazz now. And Jazz, so you've finished law and your law degree and you're now working, but when you did your law degree, you did the legal futures and technology major. And I wondered if you might talk about why you did that and how do you think that's influenced your career?
Yeah, so I took up the legal futures and technology major because I just have an interest in technology and how it intersects with the law. So I guess prior to that, I had done several things with university that kind of piqued that interest. I did some hackathons. I did a legal technology moot. So for those of you that don't know what a moot is, it's like a mock trial. And it focused on legal technology premises. And that kind of snowballed, and then I saw that this major was on offer, and I took it and I thought, you know, it'll be interesting, it'll be, I guess, future-proofing my skill set for, you know, my career, and I found it really enjoyable. It was definitely the most enjoyable units that I undertook in my degree, just because it was really what I was interested in. It wasn't, you know, something that, like property law, for example, where it's something that you have to take, but it's not necessarily something that you'll enjoy. You learn about AI, blockchain, you know, coding. So as Leslie was saying, you kind of understand how coding works from a fundamental standpoint so that you can communicate with people that do the coding, and you can effectively communicate in a commercial context. So I found that all very helpful. And then moving forward into my career, obviously that's really helped me because after I graduated, I moved into a role at Kingwood Mallisons, which is one of the top law firms in the country. It's one of the ones that was mentioned prior that we have a partnership with. And in that law firm, I was doing a lot of stuff with blockchain, smart contracting, derivatives, data, and that kind of stuff. And my background definitely helped me get into that area, get the experience that I needed to sell myself to the firm as someone that would be effective in that area in their firm. And then from there, I worked there for about 14 months. And now I've moved into a policy role at FinTech Australia. So basically we are a industry body that represents FinTech companies. So FinTech is something like Afterpay, a financial technology company. And we advocate to the government policy positions and those kinds of things. So I write a lot of policy submissions to, you know, the Treasury and those kinds of departments. So that's really interesting. And I don't think that I'd be able to get to where I am without the support that the faculty gave me, without, I guess, the breadth of experience and your ability to look at different areas of law outside of the traditional priestly 11. And also opportunities like internships, where I had the opportunity to go overseas to China. So I was in Beijing a couple of years ago, and I worked at a legal technology company, and I got to work with, you know, the Australian embassy on a few things over there. That was pretty cool. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great major, and it really does set you up to be different from other job applicant and other students in the industry going forward.
Thanks, Jazz. That's great. And also really interesting to hear that your work has a policy focus as well. And that
Yeah.
just shows the varieties of career options for law. Law
Yeah.
is a fabulous degree to take you into other areas like that. Still, you know, needing an understanding of law, but because a law degree really does help you to think in very analytical ways,
Yeah.
to think about process and so forth. So that's great. Now, here's a good one for Pia. I have heard that there is a lot of reading within law. Is this true?
Oh gosh, it's the age-old stereotype, isn't it, for the law degree? Look, of course there is reading in a law degree, but as I mentioned before, I think that the readings that you have to do, everything that you're given at UTS really aims to build your skills in many different ways, whether it's patience or tenacity and perseverance, and also the practical skills. So the readings that you do, obviously they're always meaningful in some way. You're not getting readings just for the sake of it. It's not some sort of punishment. And I think it's really balanced out by the practical assessments that we get. For example, I remember in administrative law having to write a government submission for an assessment. And just the different formats of assessments that you can get, you really then see the value of the knowledge that you do get from the readings and from doing the readings. And I think, as well, as I mentioned before, the culture at UTS and being able to share with your colleagues and understanding and distributing workloads and having work or group study sessions together really helps as well. So, and UTS always have really great support systems, as well as the UTS LSS. They offer different buddy programs and mentorships that you would definitely benefit from, and understanding the best way to navigate those readings and do them in the best way possible, in the most efficient way. So don't be scared for the readings. It's all going to be fine.
Maxine, what might be the pathways available if a student received an ATAR lower than the selection rank?
That's a great question. Thank you very much, Leslie, and welcome everyone to UTS. We have several pathways at the university, and I'll just briefly mention those. I would encourage all school leavers to talk to your either careers counsellor or senior studies teachers about what pathways are available to all students. So UTS has its own unique pathway called inputs, and that's available for students that have experienced some degree of disadvantage. And what that enables those students to do, if they receive an ATAR that is 10 marks less than the usual ATAR each year, and that does vary, but for the last couple of years, the UTS Law ATAR has sat around 96, 97. So if you receive 10 marks lower than that, through the input scheme, you'll be offered a place into a law degree. The other scheme that is also associated with schools, and we'll have information at your schools about this scheme, is a schools recommendation scheme. And that scheme is available for students who have experienced quite severe hardship or exceptional circumstances that has meant that they can't achieve their full potential. And for law, if a student is eligible for a place through the SRS, as it's called, you need to achieve an ATAR of 80 to be offered a place in the law degree. For any elite athletes out there this evening, you may also come through the Elite Athletes program, and there's information about that program on the website. And then very importantly, we have another scheme through the Indigenous Students Pathway Scheme. So if you are an Indigenous student, you have the opportunity to come through. That's managed by Jumbana, which is our Indigenous Centre for Learning and Research at UTS, and there's a direct entry pathway through there. There are several other pathways, and I'll just mention them briefly. You will find information on the website. I know many of our students, and indeed several of our students, didn't start with us at UTS. They had always wanted to come to UTS. They had heard about the law degree that they believed really suited them. They might have had friends or siblings that had studied with us at UTS. So my advice to those students is to commence your law degree somewhere else. You really want to do law, and study hard in your first year of law at another university, and then apply through UAC to come to us. Subjects will be assessed, and most students will receive some credit recognition, so you don't need to repeat all your subjects. Obviously, it depends at the law school you study. The other pathway you can think about is starting with us at UTS, but not in a law degree. Let's say, as the Dean indicated, most of our students are doing a double degree. So you could start, for example, in business or in communications, because you don't achieve the ATAR at first instance to get into law. Do a year in business, communications, science, wherever. Do well, study hard, do well, and you get lots of instruction, support, assessments, as P has talked about, throughout your course. So it's a matter of really studying hard, but with that guidance that really makes it much easier for you to know how you're going with your study. Do well in your first year. Again, apply through UAC to come into a combined law and the other discipline. You've already got 1 year done. That gives you the opportunity to, it'll still take you a little bit longer, but depending again on how your subjects are organised, it could take you between 6 months or 1 year longer. And then another pathway, which I'll just mention, it would seem like to you as year 10, 11 and 12 students a long way off, but it is a popular pathway for students who either have wanted to do law and for several reasons haven't been able to do law. They do a degree in another discipline, and then they join us as a Juris Doctor or a JD student. That's a postgraduate law degree. So the entry to that degree is having an undergraduate degree in another discipline. You then undertake your JD, and you're in the same position in terms of your academic qualifications as an undergraduate degree. And if I can just mention one thing that you might not be aware of, because again, it's a bit in the future, is to be admitted as a legal practitioner, and the Dean has spoken about the number of our graduates that do become admitted as legal practitioners, and some may not go on to practice. You need to do the academic qualification, which is your LLB or your JD. You also need to do practical qualification, which is a practical legal training course. And we're very fortunate here at UTS to have a very long established practical legal training course. So here at UTS, you can do both your academic qualification and your practical qualification, and then can be apply to the New South Wales Supreme Court to be admitted to practice.
What does legal technology mean in a practical sense?
So legal technology can mean several things. Firstly, it could be the application of technology in a professional legal context, such as document management, or maybe using AI to comb through contracts, or to look through documents during the discovery process for when you're looking for evidence during a trial. The other way that it can refer is through the interaction of the law and new technologies. So for example, smart contracts and whether or not these can be real contracts and are legally enforceable in a court of law. Who's liable when a autonomous vehicle hits someone? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the driver? Is it the owner of the car? And things like of this nature. So it's a bit of a contextual question, but those are the things that you look at in a legal major. And then I guess moving forward in the legal profession, and especially with the things that I do, I look at the legal consequences of like what laws apply to this technology. What rights do you have if you hold Bitcoin or if you hold some kind of cryptocurrency? Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jose, and well done. And again, there's quite a lot on our website that you can read about that and the nature of the major. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. One of the nice things when you do come onto campus for these evenings is we actually get to talk to you face to face and to meet you and to hear a bit more about you.